All righty.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Derek and Craig, a little show we do Mondays and Fridays, usually just talking a little bit about everything most of the time, but we're trying to limit it to topics. And today's topic, we wanted to talk some about site reading and some of the stuff that goes along with it as far as investigating a site and doing research about it. It's something that it's become a necessity for me and, well, for Craig also. We do a lot of research on sites before we even go out there using different methods. One of them that Craig and I have used in the past is sites like historic aerial, websites, historic aerials or any kind of mapping overlay you can get on a particular area if you have permission on to hunt to see what was there years ago, or maybe they have older maps that go all the way back into I've seen some places that have maps all the way back to the 1700s on their particular website, and you can kind of match up. And I know that some of the guys use this. I know Tom Bunch does, and a lot of the more experienced hunters, relic hunters, do this. They take an old map and overlay it onto a new one to figure out where you might see an old store or something marked old store on it, or a hospital or something like that, and you can overlay it onto a new map, and at least most of the time, and be able to figure out exactly where that building was, or that area that you're looking to hunt, what it had on it. These just little, I guess you can call them tips and tricks, Craig. I don't know. I mean, it's just stuff that you learn over the years. If you find a spot, you need to, and you think there was something on there, there's certain ways you can do this, whether it be through, I use a tax office. They have mapping stuff for parcels and stuff for people's property down here, and, to see where the property lines lay and stuff like that. A lot of times, depending on which state you live in and how that works as far as the tax thing. Another place is schools, like colleges. I found the University of Florida, I get on their website and they have maps and they have historic photos. Sometimes you look out and find these maps and these pictures and stuff like that, and you can kind of link it to the area that you're hunting. And once you get on a site, it's a whole different ball game. But there's so many places, I guess, I never really thought of. I've been on different websites looking for, whether it's electrical stuff or whatever, and they have a background story about their business. And it turns out that, I was looking at something at Homosassa, Florida, and it had something about the Civil War. They made syrup or whatever they were doing, but they make reference to it back in the Civil War times or whatever era that they have on there, and you can kind of link it up and get an idea of what was going on in the area even before you go to the site itself and hunt it. Craig and I, over the years, I mean, Craig, you could talk a little bit about this too, because you've done this longer than me, or you get on a site and you're looking at a big area, there's nothing on it. What's the first thing you do? I mean, really?
Well, I can give you a story. I had been hearing about this Fort Texas camp years ago, and I guess in the 1990s, and it was I found, well, I'd heard about it 18th Georgia camp, and they were part of the Texas Brigade, and I knew they were, right along Route 1. And I got this guy's a historian that writes a lot of books, kind of gave me permission to hunt this 18th Georgia camp, and my friend Howard, I called him, and because I didn't know exactly where it was, and he told me where to park, but he said he couldn't give me real directions, and I went back there and I found it like in 5 minutes just by walking down this path and looking, and all of a sudden I see hut sites all up and down the whole hill.
Oh, wow.
And I hunted that, off and on for about 3 years until they bulldozed it, maybe 4 years. But I was always I knew on the other side of Route 1, somewhere in this vast section of woods was this Texas camp, and it went for miles in every direction, and so I was reading this guy, Howard Crouch, was a famous relic hunter. He died a few years ago, but he did a book called Relic Hunter, and there was a map that was drawn. Well, during this time, there was a lot of skirmishes it's like not really skirmishes, but Union boats were riding up and down the Potomac going down to Washington with supplies and stuff, and the Confederates had little like batteries along the Potomac, and they were blasting at them, and so they'd have little battles like where the ships would fire at the the batteries, and the batteries would fire back, and so that was mentioned on there too. And so there was a map there was a Union guy that decided they would go up in a balloon, and he went up on a balloon, I think from the other side of the river, and when he went up, he could see the camps. So he drew a map, like a hand-drawn map.
Right.
And so I'm reading this little chapter. It was a little short chapter. There wasn't much in it, except where it was or anything. But there was one other clue. It was that the camp was cut in half by a power line, and what was the other one? Oh, and the way this camp was found was they'd been searching. All these relic hunters been searching for years for this thing, and they couldn't find it. They just were baffled where it was. And one of them actually, they rented I think a Piper Cub, and they flew over the area, and they kept flying over until they found it from the air. And so anyway, I was hunting at the Georgia camp one day, and I thought, when I was leaving, I thought, I'm going to drive across the road and see if I can find a power line, and that kind of parallels Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I drove back there, and I saw the school up there, and I drove around the school, and I noticed the power line was running right across the property. And so I went up, and I saw where it went up a hill, and it was kind of like just beyond a neighborhood. So, but the road went all the way down to the river. So I thought, man, I could park there and hike up this power line and see if I can find it. So my brother told me that a friend of his wanted to metal detect, and so I said, well, I can take him out. I got a couple of machines, and I was using a Nautilus, so I gave him a white Spectrum, and so I said, I don't know, I said, I'm going to look for this site today, and I said, we're going to walk up the power lines and see if we can, and I'm going to hunt each, ridge that looks good to see if I can find any,
evidence. Yeah, evidence
And,
of them being there.
so we went up the hill, and it was really steep going up to this thing, and it was, we walked about a half a mile before we came to the first ridge, and so I ran down the ridge, and the Nautilus has an all-metal mode and a discriminant mode that goes at the same time. So I was just listening for iron, nails and stuff, to see if that, if there was nails in the ground, it meant there was activity there, and there wasn't any on the first ridge. So I said, the other guy was a total rookie. He didn't know, So I told him, I said, nah, let's go to the next ridge, or let's walk on further, So we got to the top of this hill, and it started down, and I looked off to the right, and there was a old pathway that was real wide, and it almost looked like a cart path, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, hey, let's check that path there, So we start down the thing, and I get down about, I don't know, I go about 50, 60 feet down the ridge, down that path, and I see a giant hut site. It's probably 4 feet deep. I said, oh my God, look at that. And so I look off to the left, and I could see where there was some kind of house site, and people had dug these huge holes into the side of the bank there. And so we walked over there, and I was swinging the machine, and the ground was really weird, and it was just full of square nails. I mean, it was everywhere. Every swing you got, all metal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started hunting. I got up where and I could tell the people that were digging those holes, all they were digging was nails. It was just, God, the place was just full of them.
Yeah.
And so I went, there was a little high point right there, and then it went down a hill. So I started hunting right along the edge of the hill, and I got two infield bullets, and they had 57 in the bottom of them. And I said, man, those are the ones the Texas guys had. So they were in this area for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking around, and I looked up toward the west, and I see these cedar trees all on this big bridge. So I told my friend, I said, man, there's a colonial house site probably up on there on that hill.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I don't see anything. And I said, see those cedar trees? I said, that's not natural. They're all bunched together. I said,
somebody put them there. Yeah, somebody planted those, yeah.
So then I started looking around. I said, look, there's a mock orange tree down here. There's some other flowering trees. I said, this place is really old here. And so we walked up the hill, and I think we each got an Indian head and a couple flat buttons. But it wasn't until about maybe, I don't know, 4 months later that I found the Texas camp. And it was funny. You could walk right, past it and not know it was there. And I kept going down too far down the hill, and then cutting to the left to try to find it. And I would walk right by it at the bottom.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And I realized later that that probably was swampier, because it was right near a creek, Potomac Creek.
Right.
And so it was like later when I had that dream, and I dug that Confederate button, and I went up there and I found the Georgia button, just like it happened in the dream. And I started hunting it, and I started finding it in this little corner at the top of the hill, and it turned out it was right above the Texas camp. There was all these infields, and I got an infield lock plate and the button, Georgia button, and some other stuff. And I started going down the hill right along there, and that was the day where I met this guy that looked like Indiana Jones. And he had the same hat, the same vest, same pouch. And I I thought, I see this guy coming, up the hill, and he's waving, and I think, oh God, here comes an archaeologist, probably going to give me a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
And, so it turned out the guy lived in the neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
He said that he goes, man, what are you looking for? And I said, oh, there's a Civil War camp up here and a colonial site over there. And he goes, oh, really? And he goes, what'd you find? So I said, I found some bullets. I found a Confederate button, and found lock plate. And,
right.
There's a lot of. I'm just, I've only been up here 4 or 5 times, but I'm starting to case the place out. So anyway, he said that about 3 years before that, the archaeologists had gone down this slope, and on the third terrace down, they had seen what do you call it, chips from arrowhead making and stuff.
Oh, shards.
So they dug there. Yeah, so they dug there, and I guess he'd helped them out, or he'd been down there watching them or something. So he said that every time it rained, real hard or something, he would come down there and search along that area. So I thought, man, I'm gonna have to start looking for arrowheads,
Yeah.
And that's where I got good at it too. When they, I found a couple, but then when they bulldozed, it was like the place was just littered with shards and arrowheads, spear points,
Mm-hmm.
from everything from 11,000 years. I think the oldest one I got was 11,600 years old, which is incredible. I mean,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
God.
Well, Craig, a lot of these sites too. What I've noticed, in my years of relic hunting and stuff, is if you start finding, even on, I talk to the landowner. Number one, I mean, it can be. I always tell people to, go there expecting to talk to somebody for 2 hours, because once they find out what you're wanting to do, if they're interested in it, all they start having questions. But listen to what they're telling you about your site, about this, about their property, what they know about it. Don't follow it by like gospel or anything, because I've had many people tell me, oh, there's never been anything here. You're welcome to look around out there, but there's never been any buildings, never been in this and that. And I've, go into the place and I start finding stuff. And I know it's a house site because of what I'm finding there, doorknobs, hinges, whatever, bottles. You start finding this stuff under the ground. They had no idea it was there, but it seems like, and what I've seen down here, the old cracker kind of houses, I call them cracker houses, from years ago, and I've seen some that are still standing or just got recently bulldozed because they just fell over. They were rotted out with termites and stuff. But people rebuilt. If it was a good area, or high and dry or whatever, there was a good water source. I mean, it might, if you're finding stuff from, the Civil War, all of a sudden you're starting to see stuff from colonial times. It was an area that they could get to. There was other activity there, is what I mean. All the way back, and you're finding, arrowheads and stuff like, stuff like that there. I mean, there's been activity there through, hundreds of years, because it's a nice area or whatever, high and dry. Water supplies, you're looking for plants that aren't indigenous. And I find it even down here in Florida is very hard to sight read down here, because stuff changes so radically. You can have an open pasture, and then 50 years later it's covered in trees. Same thing up there, Craig. I mean, you see the old Civil War picture,
yeah,
and it's like it's a empty field, and all of a sudden nowadays it's a big forest, because, they had a battle there or whatever, and they were cutting firewood all the time. They were staying warm, whatever. They kind of cleared the area, and then it, grows back up and everything, 100 years later, it doesn't even look the same. So you're looking for just odd things. I mean, if you find a pile of bricks or a pile of stones that are put in a certain area, I mean, they used them as footers or whatever to, when they build a house or something like that. Stuff that doesn't match the area anywhere else in that particular area, keep a note of it in your mind there, and start detecting that area, because if you start finding activity, sometimes that's all you have to go on. I mean, I'm to the point on some of these properties I hunt. I mean, even a certain kind of palm tree that's not really indigenous to this area, And I've only seen 2 on the whole property, and we're talking 400 or 500 acres. It makes me want to, okay, go over here and start looking around, because those were probably planted. It's kind of like the cedar trees, Craig. They're not usually clumped up in groups, like you were talking about, or certain flowers or bushes, something that doesn't, it looks out of place. That should be a, key in your search for activity on that property. It can happen anytime. You just have to be open-minded and listen to what people are telling you about their property, what they know about it. They may have noticed. Go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
One thing is, people, back then needed wood. Wood was very valuable. I read diaries where, people that in the South that, the Union soldiers would come in and, put a camp on their property or nearby, and the next thing they knew, they didn't have any woods left or any wood. It was just totally gone. And there was a couple plantations near my tennis shop. One of them I was hunting, near the little strip of woods where I found the SNY buckle, but that 236 Duke Street was there during the, back in the Civil War times. And I even read diaries where these guys would take the whole regiment, and they would, go on a 10-mile hike all around, and they would talk about all these camps, they were marching by, like 40,000 people, 40,000 Union troops camped in the middle of nowhere in Alexandria, I remember, digging, bullets in, people's yards, and people, there wasn't any battle here. There was no fighting here, was there? And I go, no, these are camps. And they, people don't understand that, they all they think about is the battles, but.
Well, 30 or 40,000 troops, Craig. I mean, God, they had to stay somewhere, and they were a stressor on this environment. I mean, wood and water and anything else they can get. I mean, they had to survive.
They were, there were a lot of young guys and, a lot of teenagers and young men, and they would, they'd be in a camp and they'd start, walking around and checking out the area, and a lot of the people would go up to people's homes and beg for food and water and different things, and probably even steal stuff,
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they plunder, Well, this goes back even to the Revolutionary War, colonial times, whatever. They had to have camps. They had to place for their troops.
Well, like the 12th, the 18th Georgia camp, it was up on this big ridge, and then, when I was exploring that area down toward the creek, it was right above Powell's Creek, and the same with, over a mile away where the Texas camp was, it was up on a high point, and the Indians were there. The Indians were up there on the other camp too, because we found arrowheads in that area too. But, the Indians and the war camps were all on the high ground. They didn't camp right down next to the creek, because it was just too wet, and it floods and everything. But it's kind of funny how, man, doesn't matter if you were Indians back in the old days or man nowadays, they want to camp on the high ground.
Right.
It's just, that's another thing that, I started learning was, check areas, high ground above creeks and stuff, because that was the prime areas.
Well, plantation properties too. With the, I see them down here where they've drained the land here in the 40s, 30s and 40s. The Army Corps of Engineers came through and put Jumper Creek in and all this stuff to try to drain the land, so it can be inhabitable. So I hunt fields and I see low points in the field, and all of a sudden you'll be detecting, and you dig a target and you'll hit a pole, and it's actually a dock. They had a dock right there or something like that, but it's all dried up now. It's all grassland, but it's a low point. So, if it was a water supply, people needed water, wash clothes, drinking water, swimming, whatever they did right there. And, a lot of those watering holes or whatever are gone now. I mean, there's still an indentation where they were, but I mean, it's all overgrown, with grass or whatever else. And unless you know what you're looking for, because they had to have water. I mean, that's the one key thing if you have a stream running through there or a low point where water could have been, or maybe you find an old well. I mean, we still have them down here in Florida like that too. You know, they're actual wells where you lower a bucket down in there. And I had them, the old town of Panosofsky, where it was. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 of them. They filled a couple of them in, and it's just out in the middle of a pasture. You'll see a well. It's kind of a neat kind of thing. And they had to fill in a couple of them, you know, because they were getting dangerous or whatever. But there's still some sitting right by the state road right there. You can see them, you know, maybe 100 feet or so from the road. And it was an entire town there. I mean, hotels, bars, churches, you know, and now it's nothing. It's just flat land. And it's like, you know, where did it go? I mean, you know, it was there because we saw it, you know, they tore this down about 10 years ago, you know, leveled the ground out, made a sod farm out of it. But yeah, I mean, we're talking an entire town just gone. And unless you know what you're looking for these little things, you know, like bricks or whatever you can find, pottery. And we found stuff, a lot of pottery, a lot of arrowhead shards and everything else that predates that town. You know, they've moved it over now. I mean, it relocated in 1900 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, we're talking, you know, I seen on Instagram actually, the guys they had a short video about an old cemetery they found. It was 18 people there buried, you know, 1865, stuff like that, right during the Civil War. And the guy looks back there and he goes, "Oh, this one's from the 1700s." But there's nothing else around that I could see. I mean, I didn't go into a lot of research on it, but yeah, I mean, you know, he's dated it back. But cemetery, there had to have been something else around it. People wouldn't travel a huge amount of distance to go to the cemetery. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's you just start looking around and everything. But you know, we're getting up there on time. Oh, go ahead, Craig.
Probably a church nearby too.
Church or something, yeah. So that shows activity. You know, kind of this subject can go on and on. We can actually do another show on this because there's a lot of information that we didn't really get to today. But I did want to say, Craig and I found it this morning. This is actually a pretty cool thing to check out on Facebook. Craig, I have to go over here too because I can't remember the name of it now. Here we go. This guy actually engraves shovels. And I don't know if it's a company. I didn't go into a lot of detail as far as look. I just saw some of his, I call it artwork because it's a beautiful job he does. It's called Optimist Spades. It's on Facebook. And check it out, man. He has one here, a British soldier walking down a path.
I put it on the hardcore page too on Facebook. So
oh, okay.
I'm going to copy some pictures over to Instagram too, so you can see them.
I don't think I'd even use these shovels. These shovels, I mean, this guy does a fantastic job. The detail on these things, pretty incredible.
They got the guy is British, I guess, and he does there's scenes of British soldiers and stuff on it, I guess.
Yeah, knights and whatever you want on there, I guess. But I don't know if he's doing it freehand. If he's doing it freehand, he's really good. Or whether it's a machine that does it. But it's all different metal detecting shovels, you know, just aggressive and everything else. But you could almost hang these things on your wall. I mean, I think they're that good myself. But it's something just to check out there. Also check out our Patreon page. There, be a supporter at patreon.com hardcore metal detecting or / hardcore metal detecting. You know, we're just you know, looking for people, you know, to kind of promote people. Help them out, help us out, you know, and kind of get more information out there and everything. So it's something that Craig and I started up, and we're kind of seeing how it goes because we haven't really messed with that kind of stuff before. It's kind of like Instagram with me. I'm still getting used to it, and I know Peter Beaufoy, he's been messaging me back and forth, but I've been trying to post stuff up on there, so I'm catching up a little bit too. I'm so used to the way that some of the other formats like Facebook and stuff work, and I'm trying to figure out the Instagram thing, how to post up photos and stuff. I put a little video, Craig, you know, I talked about it on the other day, the deer walking up on me when I'm sitting there on my back porch having a cup of coffee within 25 feet. I mean, that's never happened before. So I got a little video and some pictures on Instagram about that. I don't know if they're showing up right or not, but it's something different for us.
Instagram works a little better on the phones than it does I could share from my page, anything from my page over to the hardcore metal detecting Instagram site. So I couldn't do it on my iPad, but I can do it on the iPhones. But I've got it. I think we're up to about 139 people on.
Followers.
Yeah. I've got a page called Blissful Deus, and I've had it for a few years. But I went up. I've gone up about over 40, I guess, on my page. I'm up over 1,080 on that page, but it took me a while to get up to that. But both pages are starting to grow a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, even hardcore. I mean, we're getting actually a lot of followers on there. And be sure if you haven't followed the page, and I think we're over 25,000. Well, I know we're over 25,000 right now, probably, a little bit more than that even. And more and more people are kind of following the podcast shows and stuff like that. And we really appreciate it. It just gives us an idea that, people are listening and what part of the country you're in, that kind of thing. And like Peter's over in New Zealand, and then we got Gavin, he's in Australia. We got guys in Spain and Germany, Japan, just all around the world, of course, the U.S. and South America and stuff like that. It's just kind of cool that, the relic hunting, metal detecting is just all over the place. People, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're from. There's people in every country that love to do it if they're allowed to. I mean, there's some countries I don't think you can legally, so, it's nice to at least be able to, hear other people, what they're finding and everything, or see it on Facebook, or, kind of live a little bit through them.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You want information on metal detecting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
To it. So that's one thing we're all common with. It's trying to find out information about the best detectors and getting the most out of the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fun. It seems to be expanding more and more internationally, where people from other countries are interested in what's going on in America and stuff. But we have the biggest market in the world as far as products and stuff and sales.
Well, yeah.
So that that's where everybody's going to want to put their products on our market.
Yeah, between that and the UK. Well, it's becoming such it's been a huge hobby anyways, but I mean, Craig, I've noticed in the last 5 years, it's really just booming. People just wanting to dig up some history and it's just fun. You get dirty. You don't know what you're going to find. A lot of stuff you find that it's just neat stuff. It's not really worth a whole lot, but it's, I don't know. I always kind of like the buttons and the tokens and the old coins and just whatever. I mean, it doesn't, a lot of stuff you dig, you don't even really think about until you dig one of them up, like padlocks or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, some kind of old relic, what it was used for, where it came from, why they made it. It brings up a lot of questions, and who was in the area, just the history of your town, history of your area. That's one thing I love doing is traveling around. I haven't done it in, about a year or so, but, traveling to these different states, being able to detect in every state, even overseas, I'd love that, and then, eventually get there, had the opportunity to detect in Bulgaria and stuff like that. I want to go to the UK and hunt, just a dream of mine to do that. But I'm sure, a lot of other people have that same dream. So, if I can live it through somebody else's eyes, through their videos or whatever, I mean, that's kind of what it's about, Craig. I mean, if you can't go there, you might as well live it through somebody else's, experience over there. So, that's one of the reasons why I want to start up the Patreon page to kind of get things going on it. Got goals set for ourselves, and it benefits, trying to benefit other people also. Help them out. Like this guy with his shovels, man, that just blew me away when I saw those. And I don't know how long they've been in business or how long he's been doing them, but he does really nice work. And I know there's a lot of guys, that do stuff in this country too, in the U.S. And Don from Detector Doodads is one of them. I mean, he has a vision. He's an artist, man. He gets those 3M printers going and design stuff, and that fit on the end of pinpointers, the spy glasses, the little jeweler's loops or whatever you want to call them, mounts for your cameras to go on your metal detectors, these aftermarket kind of things that we start metal detecting, we want to start videoing. Oh man, I wish they had a mount for this. Now how do I make one? Oh, wait a minute, Dawn has one over here at Detector Doodads, and it'll match up to my AT Pro or whatever, and I don't have to make one myself. So it helps out everyone, I think, and gets more content, more information out there for people. So, and I've already gone 5 minutes over, Craig, so I guess I ought to wrap this thing up this morning, have some more coffee. Telling you, I can't go and talk for a half an hour. I got to keep on talking.
I know, we're not used to that, are we?
No. But guys, thanks for listening in. I'm going to try to do a show on Wednesday morning, me and Craig. And, of course, we'll be on Friday morning also. Our regular shows are Thursday and Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Raw, unfiltered. We don't script hardly ever. Every time I try to script, I can't do it. So we just got to go off the cuff. So thanks for listening, guys. You have a safe morning. Be careful out there if you're heading to work or wherever. Maybe you're lucky enough to call and play hooky a little bit and go metal detecting. Just tell them I said it was okay. See how that works for you. At any rate. All right, guys. Have a good day. Keep digging, and God bless.